using div and span tags with CSS.
Now that you've learned about the style elements, let's move on to some organizational elements in HTML. Div and span are two elements in HTML that you will discover in this tutorial. Developers use div and span elements to create sections or containers that can be styled with CSS. After this tutorial, you'll be able to understand div and span and the differences between them, add a background color for certain content, use the flow property, and add a margin for specific content.
Start with the same example file you used in the previous tutorial. We will use the CSS external style sheet for this demo. To divide the first paragraph into a section, type the opening div tag before the first opening paragraph tag. Then, type the closing div tag on the line after the first closing paragraph tag. For the second paragraph, type the opening span tag on the line before the second opening paragraph tag and the closing span tag after the second closing paragraph tag. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. Notice that there is no change reflected on the web page since these are organizational elements. They work behind the scenes. So, let's try to see the effect by adding some background color. In the external style sheet, type div and press enter. Then, type opening curly brackets background :yellow semicolon closing curly brackets. Leave a line and then type span and press enter. Then type opening curly brackets background :blue semicolon closing curly brackets. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. The background of the first paragraph has changed to yellow, but there is no change in the background of the second paragraph. Why did the yellow background show but the blue background not show? This is because div is a block element, while span is an inline element used to organize part of the content. As you have learned in the previous module, span, an inline element, can be inserted in a block element, but not the other way around. Paragraph. P is a block element. Therefore, you are not getting the appropriate results. Let's exchange the placement of these two tags to see what happens. Delete the span tags. After the paragraph opening tag, insert the span opening tag. Then also add the span closing tag before the paragraph closing tag. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. Now, the background of the second paragraph has changed to blue. The difference between the div tag and the span tag is that the div tag, being a block level element, starts on a new line and takes up the full width of its container. The span tag, on the other hand, is an inline element, which means it does not start on a new line and only takes up as much width as necessary. Let's move the span tags to the middle of the sentence to understand this better. Delete the span tags. Type opening span tag before the words, "You'll impress your professors with your commitment to cutting-edge technology." Then, type the closing span tag. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. Now the background of only the words between the span elements in the second paragraph has changed to blue. What will happen if you give the div tag to the second paragraph too? To do this, type the opening div tag above the second paragraph opening tag and type closing div tag after the second paragraph closing tag. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. Now the background of the second paragraph has changed to yellow. except for the words between the span elements. You now have two paragraphs. Using the div element and the span element is still placed in between blocks. Div is a useful element that is commonly used to organize the content, but there are a couple more uses. Let's add some width and height to the div element. To do this, in the external style sheet, after yellow semicolon, type width colon 500 pixels semicolon and press enter. Then type height colon 300 pixels semicolon and press enter. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. The yellow background is now in two blocks around paragraph 1 and 2. You can try the same thing with the span element to see if it has any effect. To do this, copy the code from the div element and paste it in the span element after blue semicolon. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. The blue background has not expanded since span is an inline element and not a block element. Therefore, the effect of width and height does not apply to it. Let's explore another interesting property called float. When you give an element the value float, the content within that element can be floated to the left or to the right. To do this, type float colon left semicolon in the div element after 300 pixels semicolon. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. You can only see the second block now. The first paragraph now floats to the left and the second block has moved up. Another exercise you can try is to give the content a margin to see it more clearly. To do this, type margin colon 10 pixels semicolon after left semicolon in the div element. Refresh the browser to see if the changes are reflected on the web page. You can see a 10 pixel margin between the two paragraphs now.
You have now seen the use of organizational elements like div and span. The div tag is used widely in web pages to give them structure. In this tutorial, we can only cover the limited CSS properties. To learn more, visit some web pages that interest you, inspect the code, and observe how div or any other element is being used. Hope these tutorials help you enjoy coding in CSS and HTML more.